I recently did a sketchbook tour looking back at some of my old work, and it kind of put me back in the headspace I was in when I first started realism. Thinking about some of my initial struggles, there are a few things that would have definitely helped my learning curve. So I thought I'd put together 5 tips for drawing photorealistic drawings that would hopefully help you too if you're a beginner or even if you're intermediate and you're trying to level up your drawings. So grab your supplies or grab a drink and let's go. Hey people, it's Temi if you're new here. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you 5 tips for photorealistic drawings. And before I start, if you don't like photorealistic drawings, if you think it's just copying, if you think what's the point, you can just exit the video now. I don't mean to choose violence, but on your way out, watch this video here where I talk about if realism is real art or not. And I'm sure I'll see you back in this video in a bit. But for the serious people, let's get straight into the tips. You want to use a high quality reference. Someone said using a reference is cheating. Who said that? A reference is so important with realism because to be able to depict real life, you need to be able to see it. And I know there's some people that can imagine things in their head. I personally can't. I've got aphantasia. I actually cannot visualize anything in my mind. But even for the people that can, I would say still use a reference. Swatches, a channel on YouTube, actually have a video where they're talking about drawing from a reference versus your imagination. And it's very insightful. I'll link that video down in the description box. But in short, it's easier to capture realistic details when you can see the realistic details, when you're not trying to make out where the lights and the shadows might be going. So for references, I'm speaking about both drawing from life and drawing from photographs. If you're interested in portraits, it might be hard to draw a person from real life. So I would say start by doing life drawings of still life objects, anything you've got around your house. Practice changing the light, seeing how the shadows change, seeing how you can change up the composition. And if you're drawing in daytime where the lighting might change over the course of the day, you might choose to just take a photograph of what you can see in front of you, and you can draw from that photograph also. The most important thing here is to make sure the photograph is high quality. Most smartphones nowadays can take a pretty good photograph, but what you need to pay attention to is the lighting, because the same phone can take 2 very different looking photographs depending on the lighting. So make sure you've got lighting that you're happy with. If you don't have actual studio lights, you can always use a flashlight of a friend's phone and just try to come up with lighting you're happy with, but make sure the photograph is well lit and it's an overall high quality reference picture. Alternatively, if you don't want to take your own photograph, you can always grab one from the internet. There are a ton of royalty-free websites, but I usually get my reference pictures from Instagram or Pinterest just as I'm scrolling, anything that inspires me. I just save it and then eventually I might get around to drawing it. I should add that if you're doing this method, then try as much as you can to credit the photographer if you know who it is. But the main point about realism is that you want to study the reference for the drawing. And that leads on to the second tip, which is that the sketch is one of the most important parts of the drawing. So it is absolutely vital you get the sketch right. You can have amazing shading skills, you can have amazing coloring skills, but if the sketch is off, the drawing will not look realistic. There are a few methods for getting an accurate sketch, and I'm still going to do a video about sketching and the best methods. But if you're a beginner, a great method is the grid method. This is a method where you draw grid lines on your reference picture as well as in your sketchbook, and then you copy what you can see, focusing on 1 square at a time, which will hopefully allow you to look at the main piece in small sections, which will then bring the entire piece together. A tip I can give you for this is to actually do the grid lines digitally, and you can print the reference picture with the grid lines on, and you can also print a blank page with the same size grid lines on, and you can use that blank page for the sketch. This is great because you don't have to sit there measuring and drawing all your lines and making sure they're straight. I personally love to sketch on a separate bit of paper anyway because it's important for me to keep my sketch separate to my drawing, and I can play around on this other bit of paper, even rip it up and throw it in the bin. And then when I'm finally happy with the sketch, I can transfer what I want to keep onto my sketchbook. There are a few different transfer techniques. You can shade the back with a soft pencil like a 3B or 5B and then just draw over the lines you want to keep, or you can use a graphite transfer sheet. A bonus tip here is to use a coloured pen when drawing over your sketch lines so that you can easily distinguish the original sketch lines with what's being traced over. So I mentioned about printing your reference and printing the grid lines, but if you don't have access to a printer, that's cool. You can always draw on the grid lines manually. And there are apps on your phone that you can use to draw grid lines for the reference picture. The bonus tip here will be make sure you keep the same scale of your sketchbook and the reference. The easiest way to do this is just to ensure that you're drawing the same size squares. So if you've got 1 by 1 centimeter squares, which is very tiny, don't do that. If you've got 1 by 1 inch squares on your reference picture, then also put 1 by 1 inch squares in your sketchbook. Okay, so for the third tip, Don't be scared of shadows. So for this point, we want to think about values. So a value is how light or dark a hue is. And because in this video I'm talking about graphite pencils, we're just thinking about the grayscale. So it's just the lightest point, which is white, to the darkest point, which would be black. If you're using graphite pencils, it'll be very difficult to get to that darkest point. A bonus tip, if you really want the dark black, is to get charcoal, and you can get the darkest values. So because it's a graphite drawing we're doing today, we're just thinking about the range of light to dark values. Beginners have a habit of going too light or kind of keeping in the mid-range. So not preserving the bright highlights and then also not going dark enough for the deep shadows. And you really want to avoid that. You want to make sure you're covering a wide range of values, because you can have a piece that was from a nice accurate sketch and nicely rendered, but if the values are limited, then the piece can end up looking flat. To help you with this, there are a few tips you can do. So the first thing I do if I'm trying to do a drawing in black and white is I change the reference picture to black and white. And there are a few ways you can do this. Sometimes I head over to Photoshop, but for the purpose of this video, I'll show you how you can edit it using your iPhone. Sorry, Androiders. So you can change the filter type of these images, and for black and white specifically, I play with the last three. But you can also edit other parts of the picture, so you can edit the contrast, the brightness, the highlights, exposure, until you're happy with what the reference is looking like. The thing about realism is, since you're strictly copying a picture, you want to make sure the picture looks as good as possible so that you can trust that if you accurately depict the picture, you will be happy with your drawing. To help you with the actual drawing and doing the tonal values, it would help you to have a tonal values card. This is just a card that you make by going from lightest to darkest. You can have each of the values in different squares, or you can do a complete blend. But this will really help, as you can put your drawing in context based on what you see on your card. So this can help you if you're going too light, that actually you're missing some very dark points, and you can feel confidence as you add more pencil, more pigment, to be able to build more contrast in your piece. A bonus tip here is that the color, or in this case, the value, is only as light or dark as its surroundings. So for example, these two colors are exactly the same, but they look vastly different depending on what the background is. Okay, so if you're getting value from this, did I really do that? If you're getting value from this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out, and share it with a friend. So the fourth tip is to pay attention to the different types of shadows. So I've just addressed that shadows are important. You need to focus on the contrast and having a wide range of values, but we also need to pay attention to if a shadow is a hard shadow or a soft shadow. Thinking about shadows in general, if you shine a light on an object, the harshness of the light determines the type of shadow formed. A hard shadow has defined edges, and a soft shadow has a smoother transition from the light to the dark. So in this drawing, these shadows have been formed by gradually going from light to dark, applying more and more pencil down to blend the darkest values. But the hard shadows have more of a clean cut look. It's the sharper transitions between the light and the dark. On the face, if you were drawing a portrait, you would have a harsh shadow by the neck, where your cheek and your jaw will be considerably lighter than your neck because of how the light hits you. And the final tip, tip number 5, is to take your time. You are one layer away from greatness, and that might sound cheesy, but it's true. There really is no point in rushing a piece. I find that pieces that I spend more time, give more love to, are pieces that I end up liking the most. You're much better going off at your own pace, doing a little bit as you can. If you saw my old sketchbook tour, I was doing 2 to 3 drawings a year. If you have to focus on school, if you have to focus on work and do drawings when you can, that's completely fine. But make sure you're taking your time with your pieces and you're not rushing it. I'm sure you might look at speed drawings online, and that might warp your view of how fast people are drawing. Some of these videos can be sped 10 times, 20 times, or even 100 times. I have sped up a drawing 100 times before. And that's it. It's a speed drawing for a reason. We're not trying to sleep here and be drawing for 10 hours. But maybe one day I'll make real-time Patreon drawing tutorials when I have more time. If you'd be interested in that, let me know down in the comments. But this whole point about taking your time is so important, because most of what will make your drawing actually good is the patience and the perseverance you give towards it. In my speed drawing videos, I always speak about the ugly phase, and people think that I enjoy every step of the process. I don't. There will come a stage in your drawing where it's just looking hella ugly. And at that point, it's only you that can persevere past it. So take your time and focus on manageable chunks. If you implement these tips, I'm sure they'll help you to improve your drawing. So I hope you found these tips helpful. Please let me know if you have any tips of your own down in the comments. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you on my next video. Goodbye.